variables. Okay. Now again, displaying the values. Okay, displaying the values. If you want to display simply here, I want to use like public void display method. Okay. Now this method simply here SYSO. Now stid I want to print. Okay. Now st name I want to print. Okay. Now these are the methods simply here. Now we need to create like main method. Okay. Now after this curly braces, simply I want to write like main 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 control space enter. Okay. Now above the method only is here. Above the main method, I'm writing these methods in the sense like these methods are instance methods. Even the starting methods also we can write above the main method only. Now, yeah. Now then I want to display these values, std and stname. Now, if you want to display this thing, we need to call this method. How I can call this method? By creating object of our class. What is the object? What is the class simply? Student. Now, student st is equal to new student. Okay, new student. Now, simply here, create an object is created. Now, object creation. After creation, simply here we got like object reference. By using object reference only, okay, instance methods. Now simply st dot now here we have like a display method. Okay. Now if I execute that, if you observe, right click, run as Java application. Now say 0 null we are going to get. But why we are not getting 100 and Vijay? Observe here. Now this 100 and Vijay are present in inside this method, right? Okay. Now in this case, these variables are local variables. Okay. Outside this method, I cannot access the stid and std. Okay. These values I can access from here only. Why in the sense these are global. Okay. These variables I can access everywhere. But this initialization I provided within the assign method. Okay. Now observe carefully here. Whenever I call 27th line, okay, now the control goes to this method. Okay, this method is looking for stid and stname. Observe carefully. This display method is not responsible for like assign method. Simply this display method can't see that assign method. Okay, that's why this display method doesn't have any idea about like the values are initialized or not. Okay, that's why this stid and stname is looking for globally. Okay, globally I declared it. Now the default value for int type variables are 0. The default value for string type is null. Okay, that's why internally the compiler is created, okay, for these variables. Now that's why we are going to get 0 and null. Now, the requirement is what? I want the output. I want like 100 and which I want to print it. Then how I can print? Now, observe, whenever I call display method, the control goes to the display method. The display method is looking for std and stname, but here I didn't initialize anything. That's why before calling display method, I want to call assign method, st dot assign method. Okay, after object creation, first assign method going to be called. Okay, now what is the assign method? Simply here, the public void assign method std is equal to 100 std. Now these values are initialized. Okay, whenever it's initialized, these values are going to store where std is equal to 100, std is equal to Vijay. Now what are the values are present in the 5 and 6? std is what? 100. Now std is what? Vijay. Now values are stored. Now after completion of assign method, next the display method going to be called. Okay, the control goes to like display method. It's looking for a std and stname. Now it is looking for the global. Okay, globally what are the values right now? 100 and Vijay. Now observe carefully here. Right click, run as Java application. Now we got like 100 and Vijay. Okay. Now observe carefully. Here I am using methods. Okay. Until I'm not calling assign method, simply we are not getting output. But suppose if I comment this 27th line, what is output? 0 and null. Means what? Now explicitly we are calling the assign method. Until that we are not getting any output. Means what? Explicitly calling of methods. Now To avoid this thing, now to avoid this thing, simply we'll go for constructors. Okay, observable here, the same example but little bit different. Observable. Now here I create like variables, two methods I created. Okay, I'm going to take like one more example. Right click, new. Now class, employee class. The same variables I'm going to take employee class. This one. Now int emp id. Now string emp name. Okay, there student ID, student name. That's it. None remaining is the same. Now I want to create like one constructor. The constructor is like a default constructor. Okay. Now how I can create a default constructor for this class? What is the syntax? Access modifier, class name, parenthesis, open and close curly braces. Now access modifier, okay, class name, okay, with a parenthesis, open and close curly braces. Okay. Now in the, it is a default constructor, right? In this default constructor, I want to provide initialization for this logic. Okay, I want to provide initialization for these variables. Now simply here, emp id is equal to like 1 3 2 3 4. Now emp name is equal to kit. Okay, kit. Now here I declared, here I provide initialization. Now I want to display these values. That's why simply here I'm going to create like one method, the same method, public void display method. Okay, now the same thing here. Now printing emp id. Now give some space. Now emp name. Okay. Now in this employee class right now, how many methods we have? One method. What is that method? Display method only. What about like this one? It's a constructor. Okay. Now one constructor, one method simply here. Now create like main method. Now within the main method, I want to call display method. How I can call? By using object creation. Now what is the class here? Employee. Now we need to create object of employee. Now employee emp is equal to new employee. Okay, I created object. Now I want to call the display method to display output simply here. Now emp dot the display method. Now can you guess what is the output? Now 0 and null or 2 3 4 and Kirti? Okay, we'll see that. What is that? What we got? Directly output. Okay, now that is the important about like constructors here. How the constructor going to be called? Okay, see here. Now did I call any assign method here? No, only I call display method only. But in this case, explicitly I need to call what assign method. It's a mandatory. Otherwise, simply we are not going to get. In the employee class, now before going to call display method, what I wrote before that display method, what is the line? Object creation. Observable here. In the object creation, right side part, is there any same as constructor? Do you observe? Both are same. You observe? Okay, means what? Whenever object is created, okay, now whenever I'm writing this line, immediately this constructor going to be called, these values are initialized. Okay, now initialized, these values are storing where? In the globally. Okay, in the emp id 234, emp name right now, Kirti. Okay, now the values are stored already. Whenever I call after that object creation, I'm going to call display method. Immediately the values are going to be get like 234 and Kirti we are going to get. Now, how many methods I called here? Only one method. But here I mean, how many methods I called? Two methods. Means what? We avoiding explicitly calling of methods. Okay, that's a purpose of constructor. Now we are going to write now like to overcome that methods calling, we can use a constructor. Okay, if you want to write any initialization logic, you can go with the constructor. Don't go with the methods. If you want other logic, that's okay. Write the method. Yes. అలా పెట్టుకోవచ్చు, అది ఓన్లీ కన్స్ట్రక్ట్ డైరెక్ట్ వచ్చేసి. కానీ ఇక్కడ ఏంటి మెథడ్స్, ఓకే, ఇక్కడ ఏంటి రెండు మెథడ్స్ క్రియేట్ చేస్తాం. రిక్వైర్మెంట్ ఎప్పుడు అంటే ఎప్పుడైతే ఇనిషియలైజేషన్ సపరేట్ లాజిక్ ఉంటే, ఓకే, అన్నిటికీ ఒకటే మెథడ్ రాస్తే ఏంటి అంటే ఏమవుతుందంటే కన్ఫ్యూజన్ వచ్చేస్తుంది అనమాట కోడింగ్ లో డెవలపర్ కి. కన్స్ట్రక్షన్ లోనే ప్రింట్ అని రాస్తున్నామంటే ఆబ్జెక్ట్ క్రియేషన్ అప్పుడే ప్రింట్ అవుతుంది, అలా అవుతుంది. కానీ అలా చెప్పట్లేదు, ఇనిషియలైజేషన్ అన్నాను నేను. ఉమ్, ఇప్పుడు ఏం చేద్దాం? ఈఎంపి ఐడి ఈ నేమ్, ఈఎంపి నేమ్. ఇప్పుడు ఎక్కడ ప్రొవైడ్ చేస్తాం? ఫర్ సపోజ్ కామన్ చెప్పి మనకు డిస్ప్లే మెథడ్ లేదు. దెన్ హౌ ఐ కెన్ కాల్ దిస్? నా ఇక్కడ మనం ఇనిషియలైజేషన్ ప్రొవైడ్ చేసా, నేను ఇప్పుడు కాల్ చేస్తే అవుట్పుట్ వచ్చేస్తా చూడు. నా రైట్ క్లిక్ రన్ జాబ్ అప్లికేషన్, నా జీరో అన్న. ఓకే, మీన్స్ వాట్? ఇట్స్ క్రియేటింగ్ లైక్, ఫర్ సపోజ్ ఇఫ్ ఐ అన్కామెంట్ ఇట్, control s, right click, run as Java application. Now we are getting output. But observe carefully here. Not only this is what two lines code. For suppose if it's a big application, we have like large amount of code. Okay, in that case, if I write all the code within the constructor, there's a confusion. Okay, that's why simply here initialization logic only we are writing in the constructor. The remaining thing we are going to write the logic in the methods. Okay, that's the purpose. Okay, now we can write it. Now it's not a good thing, but okay. Now emp dot the display method. Okay, now here we are avoiding of explicitly calling of methods only. Okay, now we don't need to call like again multiple methods. Directly we can get the output. But suppose simply here, if I comment this thing, now what is output? Now right click, run as Java application. Now we are going to get 0 and null. Then who will print this 0 and null in the sense? For suppose objectively here, if I created, we are going to get 2, 3, 4 Kirti. Now if there is no constructor, okay, there is no constructor, but who will create 0 null in the sense? Inside compiler will create one system defined constructor. Okay, how in the sense it will create like this here: public employee emp id is equal to 0, emp name is equal to, no, sorry, null it will print. Okay, but suppose if I'm not writing here in this case, okay, did I write did I wrote like any constructor here? No, but still we are getting like what? 0 and null. How in the sense, if you're not creating any constructor inside the program, automatically the compiler will create one default constructor. It will assign default values for this thing. Okay, for suppose if I wrote any constructor simply here, the constructor will not create any, sir, compiler will not create any default constructor. Okay, are you clear? If constructor, if I wrote in our program, compiler will not create any default constructor. If I didn't wrote any constructor in my program, the compiler will write one default constructor. Why in the sense, it will provide a default values for the declared variables. Okay, that is the purpose of constructor. Okay, now we have like parameter constructor also we are going to discuss. First execute this one. Now go ahead. Now without this one is like without a constructor. Clear your doubt? About the fourth one, about the main method you need to write in STAD, string STD, and right, the global variables. Instead of energy. అప్పుడు ఎంత ఉంది గ్రూప్ లో జాయిన్ అయిందో తర్వాత తర్వాత ఇదైతే అకౌంట్ చేశారేమన్నా స్టార్టింగ్ మొత్తం జస్ట్ ఆన్లైన్ లో వాళ్ళు ఆన్లైన్ లో రికార్డింగ్స్ ఉన్నాయి నేను గ్రూప్ లో పెట్టాను ఈరోజు జాయిన్ అయినప్పుడు ఒకసారి గుర్తు చేయి మళ్ళీ నేను అది ఫార్వర్డ్ చేస్తాను జస్ట్ నీకు తెలుసు ఇంట్రడక్షన్ ఆల్రెడీ వినే ఉంటాను yeah online execute this example okay then only you will get an idea how to write the code okay did you observe this display method and assign method or instance method that's why we are writing these methods above the main method only okay within the main method we cannot write any methods okay it is execution process yeah okay within the main method only need to get out. ఇక్కడ ఈ వాల్యూస్ కి ఇక్కడ ఇనిషియలైజేషన్ చేశాను. డిస్కస్ చేయాలి. డిస్కస్ చేయబట్టి చాలా ప్రింటర్ okay, ఇక్కడ మెథడ్స్ క్రియేట్ చేసి డిస్టెన్స్ మెథడ్స్ ఇలా పోయింది కదా instance methods and instance variables and starting methods and starting variables in both the main methods. ఇప్పుడు ఈ మెథడ్స్ కాల్ చేయడం మెథడ్స్ కాల్ చేయాలంటే ఫస్ట్ ఏ మెథడ్స్ అని తెలుసుకోవాలి. ఈ మెథడ్స్ అంటే ఇన్స్టెన్స్ మెథడ్స్ అంటే ఆబ్జెక్ట్ క్రియేట్ చేసుకోవాలి. ఆబ్జెక్ట్ ఎలా క్రియేట్ చేస్తుంది? ఈ క్లాస్ ఆబ్జెక్ట్ క్రియేట్ చేస్తుంది. ఏం ఫిజిక్స్ display files. Very ఎందుకు వస్తుంది ఈ డిస్ప్లే మెథడ్ అనేది ఎక్కడ చూసుకుంటున్నది ఇక్కడ చూసుకోవాలి. దీనికి సంబంధం ఈ గ్లోబల్ గా చూసుకుంటున్నాను కానీ నేను డిస్ప్లే కాల్ చేయలేదు కదా, డిస్ప్లే చేస్తే కాల్ చేయాలి. ఇప్పుడు కాల్ చేస్తే ఇప్పుడు కాల్ చేస్తే ఫస్ట్ ఇది కాల్ అవుతుంది. కావాలంటే ఈ లాజిక్ ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ అవుతుంది. ఈ లాజిక్ ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ అయినప్పుడు 100 అనేది ఎంపీ స్టోర్ అవుతుంది. ఎంపీ స్టోర్ అవుతుంది. స్టోర్ అయిన నెక్స్ట్ ప్రాసెస్ చెప్పేది జస్ట్ కాలేదు ఎంపీ ఇది చూసుకోవచ్చు. ఆల్రెడీ 100 ఇప్పుడు ఏంటి అంటే ఇప్పుడు అసైన్మెంట్ కాల్ చేసేంత వరకు అవుట్పుట్ రావట్లేదు. అప్పుడు ఏంటి 2 మెథడ్స్ 2 టైమ్స్ 2 మెథడ్స్ కాల్ చేస్తుంది. అలా కాల్ చేయడానికి ఏంటంటే నేను కామన్ పెట్టేస్తాను. ఓకే, ఇప్పుడు కామన్ పెట్టేసి 0 నన్ను వస్తుంది. అసైన్మెంట్ కామన్ చేస్తే 0 వచ్చేస్తుంది. 0 వచ్చేస్తుంది. కానీ నాకు దీన్ని 100 రావాలి. ఇప్పుడు మెథడ్ లో చేస్తే మెథడ్ కంపల్సరీ కాల్ చేయాలి. నేను కాల్ చేయాలి ఏం చేస్తానంటే ఈ మెథడిక్ బదులు కాన్సెప్ట్ ఒకటి రాస్తాను. ఓకే, మెథడ్ మొత్తం తీసేస్తుంది. కామెంట్ అంటే మనం అవసరం కావచ్చు. ఖర్చుతో వేస్తాను. ఓకే, పబ్లిక్ ఓకే, ఈ లాజిక్స్ అనేవి ఈ రెండు లైన్స్ అనేవి రాస్తారు. మెథడ్లో రాయాల్సిన కన్సెప్చువల్ గా రాస్తారు. ఇప్పుడు ఏంటి అంటే మనం మళ్ళీ అసలు కాల్ చేయాలని అవసరం లేదు. ఇక్కడే అంటే 28 లైన్ లో ఆబ్జెక్ట్ క్రియేట్ చేసాం కదా, ఎప్పుడైతే ఆబ్జెక్ట్ క్రియేట్ చేస్తామో ఈ డిఫాల్ట్ కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ అనేది కాల్ అయిపోతుంది. ఆటోమేటిక్ గా కాల్ అయిపోతుంది. అప్పుడు కాల్ అయితే ముందునే డిస్కషన్ అయిపోతుంది. ఎప్పుడైతే డిస్ప్లే కాల్ చేస్తామో సార్ ముందు వీడియోస్ కూడా చూడు. వీడియో చూసి కొంచెం వీడియో మొన్నటి వీడియో చూడు. ఎగ్జిక్యూటెడ్ విత్ కన్సెప్ట్ without concept. All physical method using string. Why in the sense this display method and assign method both are instance type only. If it is instance type, we can call writing object reference. So then only we can call streaming. Whatever you wrote, the same thing we can write. Same methods to streaming. This reference name we have to use. This string only these methods are present. Copy this thing. Dot string dot here. All the methods you can visible. First we need to call display method. And display something. Contact execute it. As say 0 null we can say. But we don't need like 0 null. I need like 100 and finish. How I can call before calling the display method? We need to call assignment. It's not there after 21st line. After 21st line. Here. After 21st. After 22 months. Okay. So same with the same dot assignment. Select assignment. Now control S. So it's good. Now remove that assign method, add constructor to it. Now we don't need to call explicitly that assign method. Clear online? Executed now with constructor and without constructor. Now this one is like with constructor. Okay, the point is here. Okay, now if we have, okay, now for suppose that if you don't have any constructor in our program, okay, now compiler will create one default constructor. Okay, one default constructor. Now for suppose if we have, okay, if we have any default constructor in our program, now compiler will not create, okay, will not create any constructor. Okay, that is the point. Okay, now if we have any default constructor, compiler will not create it. If you don't have any constructor, compiler will create the default constructor. Okay, now that is about like a default constructors. Now we'll go with like a param constructors. Now simply here parameterized constructors. Okay, now the parameterized constructor simply here. Now what is a default constructor? How we can write default constructor? Or suppose simply here my class name is hello. Can write a default constructor for this thing, for this class. How I can a default constructor? Public hello with the parenthesis, open and close curly braces. Now this one is like default constructor. Now parameterized constructor in the sense like for this constructor we are going to pass some parameters. Okay, that is a parameterized constructor. Simply here public hello. Now simply here int age I'm going to pass it. Now simply here it is a parameterized constructors. Okay, now how we can call these two constructors? Simply here observe carefully. I'm going to create it. Now param demo I'm going to write. Okay, now simply here I want to create like default constructor here. Okay, now this default constructor, now control space enter, we can get default constructor directly. Okay, control space, that's it. Okay, or if you want to write your own, like you can write like public now param demo with a parenthesis. Now we can open like this. Okay, this is also okay. Or otherwise, simply I don't want to write it. Simply, if you want to create like default constructor, what? Control space. Okay. See here, whenever you enter control space, you will get like this pop-up. The first thing is like only constructor only. Enter it. That is a default constructor. Now simply here I'm going to write like simple statement here. SYSO. Now I am a default constructor. Okay, I am default constructor simply here. Now this one is like a default constructor. Okay. Now I want to write like param constructor. Okay. Now simply public. Now again param demo. I'm going to call like a int age. Simply I can pass it one parameter. Now SYSO. Now I am param constructor. Okay. Now simply the age is simply here. I can want to print like age also. Okay. Now this is a parameterized constructor. Okay. Now this is a parameterized constructor. Now default constructor, parameterized constructor. Okay. Now after the main method I must write. Okay. Now for suppose if I execute, what is the output? Now if I execute, right click, run as Java application. Now we are not going to get nothing. Okay. Now I want to create an object for suppose. Now param demo pd is equal to new param demo. If I create an object right now, okay, I didn't call anything. If I execute, what is the output? Exactly. Now observe carefully. Now whenever the 19th line executed, the right side part is what? Param demo. Okay. Now looking like, do we have any constructor? Yes. The sixth line is same as like this one only, right? You have some. Okay. Now whenever this line I wrote, immediately this default constructor going to be called. Okay. Now in this case, simply here, this logic is going to be executed. For suppose I want to execute this one. Okay, I want to execute this one. Now how I can call? For suppose simply here, one more thing I'm going to create. I'm going to copy it. For suppose control copy, control one more time I want to call. Now the references should be different every time. The reference should not be like same. Now PD1. If I execute, what is the output? Nothing. Okay, we'll see that. Right click, run as Java application. The two times it's will call. Okay. Now see here, this one also same, this one also same. The same constructor going to be called. Now instead of that, I'm going to pass in the constructor second one 78. I'm going to pass. Okay. Now in this case, object apply here. This oh, any yeah. Now in this case, object apply in the 19th line. Okay, this 19th line, this right side part going to be called default constructor. Why in this both are same. Now object apply here. Param demo. Now I am passing into type. Any value you can pass into type. Okay. Now here it is a default constructor. Okay, it is a default constructor. It is param constructor. Okay, param constructor simply here. Now right click, run as Java application. Now did you observe both default constructor and param constructor? We can wrote. But suppose simply instead of that int type, if I wrote for suppose my name I want to write. Now we are getting error. Why we are getting error? Exactly. Now param demo, it's a looking like a parameter constructor. That's okay. I'm passing some satya, but in the parameter constructor is looking like in time passing. But here I pass what? String type. That's why both are different. The same type we need to mention. If then only we can call it. Okay. Now control S, right click, run as Java application. Okay, the same output we are going to get. Now, my requirement, I want to write one more default constructor in our program. Okay, already one default constructor is there, right? I'm going to copy, control copy, I'm going to paste it. One more constructor I want to write. Simply we are getting it. Okay, means what? In a single program, we can write only one default constructor. We cannot write more than one default constructor. Okay, that's the point is what? In a single program, we can write only one default constructor. Now, if you want to write more than one default constructor, we cannot write. Okay, now that's the point about like default constructor. So for suppose I want to write one more parent constructor I want to write. Now control copy. Now control V. For suppose simply here. No, simply here. Simply here. Now we can write any number of parameters constructor. Okay, this concept we can call like a constructor overloading also. Okay, here I am passing one parameter, here I'm passing two parameters. Okay, now in this case, if I execute, what is the output? Hmm. Okay, 78, only default constructor. Null we are getting. The same output we are going to get. But I want this output. Okay, now simply here, now call like this. Now simply here, control copy, create one more object. Now 78 for suppose simply here, 12 comma Satya, right? Okay, observably 78 into type is matching. Now see related param constructor it's looking here inside it. Now here we have only one parameter. Okay, the third object now PD2 I'm going to make as the third object creation is looking for the two parameters, two parameter constructor. Simply here age and name, two values. The first one is like int type, second one is string type. If I execute right click run as Java application, see tools what we are going to get. Now the point is what? In a single program, okay, now we can't write okay, more than one default constructor. Okay, default constructor. Now, but in a single program, okay, in a single program, we can write, okay, we can write what? Any number of param constructors. Okay, any number of parameterized constructor we can write. Okay, now this process is called like constructor overloading also. Okay, yeah, note down. But done about like constructors. ఇందులో చాలా లేకపోతే ఇంకో కాన్సెప్ట్ స్టార్ట్ చేద్దాము అదర్వైజ్ సింప్లీ టుమారో చేద్దామా now slowly we are moving or okay now fast ఓకే ఇప్పుడు ఏం చేయాలంటే ఈ సాయి ప్యాకేజ్ లో ఇంకో క్లాస్ కావాలి అంటే ఏం చేయాలంటే సాయి మీద రైట్ క్లిక్ చేసి రైట్ క్లిక్ చేస్తే న్యూ క్లాస్ ఇంకో క్లాస్ కదా నాకు కావాల్సింది సెలెక్ట్ క్లాస్ ఓకే ఇక్కడ క్లాస్ నేమ్ ఇచ్చేసి క్లాస్ నేమ్ ఫర్ సపోజ్ లైక్ డెమో ఇచ్చేసి డెమో నేమ్ ఇచ్చేసి ఎంటర్ కొత్త క్లాస్ okay now slowly we are moving now tomorrow we are going to discuss like command line arguments and wrapper classes okay now slowly you can practice that's better yesterday I got like one complaint like it's started going too fast that's like slowly one by one. Okay, daily check the syllabus. Okay. Okay. Now if I'm missing anything from that, simply you can give me. Okay, I shared already in the group. You check it once. ఇన్ఫార్మ్ చేస్తా
చూసాను.
టూ బ్యాచెస్ ఇప్పుడు ఈ క్లాస్ ఇంకో బ్యాచ్ అయిపోయింది వాళ్ళ అయిపోతుంది జావా కోర్స్ ఎక్కువ మంది వాళ్ళు అయిపోతే లాస్ట్ టైం స్టార్ట్ మేము క్లియర్ అయితే ఎనీ డౌట్ okay the thing is what if you want to understand Java first how to create a class how to create a variables how to print variables these things first the basic after that after creation of variables after printing them then write the methods call the methods create a static method call that create instant method call it if this is the basics of basic without knowing these things simply we cannot understand other problems. If this is the basic, that's why this 1 week, like this week, you can practice a little bit slow. Okay. Go with the up to complete now for core Java, I will go with like some like what's it, Chrome or like that, right? As a like bright walking, right? Like that, I will go with that. Now after like advanced, whenever we complete like core Java, we'll enter an advanced. Okay, we'll go we travel with one after express. Okay, online, are you clear? Any doubt on the constructor concept? Okay, now this constructor concept